Well, Amy, thank you so much for being here with me on the Entrepreneurial Success Podcast. It has been actually quite a journey. And I think when I saw you getting your book out there, I thought I have to use this opportunity to see if you would love to come and have a chat with us on the podcast. But before I go any further, why don't I hand over to you so you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, it's so fun to be here. My name is Amy McLaren. I am a new author. I just had a book that came out 2 weeks ago called Passion to Purpose. And I'm an author. I'm a mom. I have 2 young ones at home. I have a 7-year-old little guy that we adopted from South Africa named Sam. And I have a daughter who is 10 named Marla. And I also have been married to my husband, Stu McLaren, for almost 15 years. We've been together half of our life, which is crazy because now I'm telling you my age, but I'm 41. We've been together for probably 20 years or so. So we've been together half our life. We run a couple of businesses together. We run a couple of our own businesses, but my main businesses that I run, because I am a multi-passionate entrepreneur, are my nonprofit Village Impact, which I started first. And then my second business is LadyStrength, and it centers around helping women get out of their comfort zone by participating in crazy, fun, out of their comfort zone trips, which also has a mastermind. And then my third kind of business that has come in the last year is all about real estate, investing in real estate, and specifically short-term rentals through Airbnb. All of them are connected in some ways, but definitely did not happen all the same year. They have been kind of added on as I've entered my entrepreneurship journey. And I also have a little dog at home named Callie. She's a golden labradoodle. So I guess I'm what do they say? A fur baby mom as well.
Oh, yeah.
And originally I was born in the UK, although I don't sound like it. I did move from Oxford, England when I was 10. All of my family is still there, and I still enjoy drinking Earl Grey and Tetley tea a lot. Well, way too many times throughout the day. It's embarrassing how many cups of tea I have, which should be water, every day. But that's kind of a bit about me in a nutshell.
Oh, bless you. And I love how you're telling your story. And we will talk a little bit more about the book as well in a minute, and obviously about Village Impact, which is something that I just absolutely loved. When I read your book, I just fell in love with the whole story and with everything that was going with it. But before we get there, I just want to know a little bit about your story. How did you get started, and how did that kind of journey go and evolve to bring you to where you are now?
Yeah, so it was a winding journey of lots of different ups and downs, but it's really started when I look back, as crazy as it sounds, like it started when I was young, because I grew up in a family that always gave back as a family. We traveled a lot as a family. We had these different experiences as a family. I remember Christmas time having strangers at our table because they had nowhere to go, or going to soup kitchens. Like, I did all this stuff when I was little, and that kind of concept of like giving back and helping others kind of was threaded throughout my childhood. And then I continued with it into my teenage years. I volunteered at the hospital. I still did some more volunteering with my mom at a shelter, a women's shelter. And then that thread too of travel and in seeing and experiencing the world continued into my teenage years. In my university years, any chance I had to teach abroad, teaching English abroad, I did. I taught English in England at international language school camps. I directed language school camps, and I loved it because I got paid really well, and I got to travel, right? And I got to do these different things. I lived with a Thai family for a little bit to learn about their culture, and volunteered in different places around the world. And that kind of continued with me throughout my university days. And then I went to teachers college in Australia because, of course, I love traveling. So I'm like, how can I get somewhere else other than Ontario, where we live now? That led to my master's abroad. And I loved that because I got to teach on this little island called Horn Island. And they had, like, on the top of Australia, there's a bunch of little islands. And that was amazing. I learned so much about their culture and myself. And then in a way that led to teaching. But then that point in like my career, I was married to Stu. I was teaching grade 1, and I liked it, but I didn't love it. And I talk about this in the book, where I had like this whole identity crisis of like, here I am teaching. I should be so grateful I have a teaching job. I have a pension. I have all these amazing things, but it still wasn't lighting me up. Like, I didn't love it. And I was kind of really stuck for a couple of years. And I kind of worked through that and then ended up entering the entrepreneurial space with my husband. And that took a while, like, because he's, as you know, like, or maybe he's been in the space of entrepreneurism since day one. So it took me for a while to like enter that space and feel confident in there. The charity really blossomed from one little thing. And it's so funny because I think when we think of our turns within our business or our life, like we think they're going to be these massive, like, aha moments. But it really wasn't. It was like Stu and I sitting watching TV, and we were watching Oprah's Big Give. And I said to Stu, like, I was crying, we watched it. And I'm like, that I want to do what Oprah's doing, but I want to go overseas and I want to travel like more again. I want to connect with families again. I want to learn from other cultures again. And I'm like, that's what I want to do. And he's like, you're crazy. He's like, when are we going to do that? And I'm like, well, at Christmas, because being a teacher, you only get Christmas time off, right? In the summers. And I didn't want to wait another year or to summertime. So that kind of led me into us having a fundraiser. We did a fundraiser that Christmas. We went down to El Salvador. We helped a community there. And that really was the beginning of what now is Village Impact, which is near and dear, obviously, to my heart and a big part of what I do. We raised about $14,000. We took it down to El Salvador. We helped different communities. And it was on that flight home that Stu was like, okay, I kind of can see what you want to do. And then that led to today where, and this again, like, it's not overnight. This is like 10 years later. We have, 14 schools. Each school has anywhere from 300 to 700 kids. And we've got great partnerships with the government. They help sustain the schools with other organizations on the ground. So what we have today.
Yeah.
So it's definitely been a winding one.
I know. And I love your story because, yes, I've read it in the book, so I kind of know it. But for everybody listening here, they would go like, such an incredible story, so amazing. But oh my gosh, you guys, you have to get the book and read the whole of it. There's so much more to it. And Amy is such a great storyteller as well, I will say. But I think this is very much what I see in your story as about discovering that passion. And just from that one moment, you say you were sitting watching TV, watching Oprah, and you were like, that one single moment, you were like, let's do this. I'm going to do this. But what I like about your story is you took the action. You said, I want to do this. Let's do it. Where I think a lot of people get to that point where they're like, oh, I want to do something like this, but they don't take the action. Nothing happens with it. And I know you talk about that in your book a little bit as well. So let's dive into this. I mean, I want to talk about this because your book is talking about, discovering your passion, how to discover your passion, and then obviously how that evidently leads to your purpose. So you've got 7 steps in order to help somebody go through those motions. So why don't I hand over to you, and then you can just start off by talking it through with us. And I highly advise everybody who's listening to this or watching this video, get a notebook, make some notes. And then, on top of that, we're going to talk about Amy's book. So then you're going to go get the book and you're going to get even more into this, which is just a must. Amy, let me hand over to you so you can start off and just let us know what it is that we need to do to discover our passion.
Yeah. So I break it down in the book to 7 steps. My first one is really opening up to possibility. And for me, I say in the book, a passion mindset is a possibility mindset. And I really think when you're doing something that you truly love, it brings out the very best in who we are, right? It brings out, like, when I'm doing my work on my nonprofit or my business, or doing something fun with the kids, whatever it may be, I'm bringing out that best version of myself. So that first chapter in the book is all about finding that, because I think there are some women and some men as well that, you get into life and kids come along or work comes along and you just keep doing all the same things and you forget or you push back things that aren't seemingly as important, but they are important. Like the things that we love to do matter. What we love to do matters. And so that first part is all about finding that passion, reconnecting with it, acknowledging it, and getting it onto your calendar where you can take those steps to put it back into your life. Yeah, just living in that passion mindset, it's possibility. But when you're in that mindset, you don't think about like all the things that can go wrong, right? Because you're thinking about all the things that can go right. And it's just such a great place to be. So number one is being open to that, taking the time to rediscover it or put that time on your calendar to fulfill that passion part of what you love to do. One little exercise that I have is to find your passion. Say you don't know what you're passionate about, which is like some people, they just don't know. I encourage people to go back, draw a simple straight line, go 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, like a timeline, and go back and revisit when you were 10, revisit when you're 20, 30, 40, 50, and look like what are some of those things you did in your 20s, something you did in your 30s or 40s, because there's probably a common thread throughout there that is something that you can explore again. So definitely feeding your brain with positive things, surrounding yourself with good people, like focusing on what you're passionate about and acknowledging it and putting it into your calendar is step one. And acknowledging that what you love to do matters. Like what you want to do matters. It matters for you, it matters for your family, it matters for your community. And you can have such an impact with that alone. So that would be my first step.
Amazing.
Yeah. And then part two, I really focus on, fulfilling you and different ways to do it. So in the story, I share ways to prioritize and to put those things into action. One thing that Stu and I do together as husband and wife, but then also apart as well, is we do something called putting your life into buckets. And David Fields talks about this, and I write about it in the book. And there are a few other authors that talk about this concept of looking at your life and putting it into buckets. Instead of life happening to you, it's like, how can I create the life I want? So it's looking at your life in terms of buckets. So then like bucket one, from my buckets, for example, are, giving back. Travel is a huge one for me. Exploring new teas because I'm a big tea drinker, like all the things that you love to do, right? Is your buckets. And then my husband has his buckets, and some of them are the same, but some of them are different. He's an avid rider on the Peloton. Like I love exercising, taking care of myself, doing all that stuff, but I don't want to ride the Peloton 7 days a week, but he does. So that's his bucket, and he needs to make sure that that's filled up. So it's about identifying what you love to do and ensuring that they're full, or that you're putting time towards those things that you love. And it's not only about putting time on your own, but then it's also buckets that you have in common. So it's like buckets that are shared. So we have our own buckets, we have couple buckets, we have our date night buckets, and then we have our family buckets, like giving back as a family, doing things together as a family so many times a week or whatever that looks like. So that's kind of a way to look at your life and make sure that not only you're fulfilled, but you're fulfilled as a family, you're fulfilled as a couple, and breaking it down into smaller chunks so it's not so overwhelming.
When I read about the buckets, I was like, I've heard about this before, but I've never done it. And then I said to my husband, we need to make buckets. And he was like, what are you talking about? It's like, come and sit down. We need to discuss this.
But you know what? It's great that you
did.
It was
great.
Yeah. And it is about that, right? Where you spoke to your husband, is doing it together. Because I think when you're in a relationship, especially if you're both entrepreneurial or you're not, to know that and acknowledging someone else's passions, because I say in the book that, passions can save relationships, because if you're not pursuing what you love to do, that resentment inside can build up over time if you feel resentful because you're not getting a chance to do what you want to do or your spouse is. So encouraging each other and fulfilling those passions in each other and as a family is so important as well. And communicating that, right? And just having a conversation.
And which is why I love it, because yes, he's got his, like you said, different buckets. I've got my different buckets, but then we actually found out that there were so many buckets that we had that was the same. It's like, oh, we never noticed that, but now we know how to fill those buckets together, which is even better.
And then you do different ways. I mean, I know for me, I'm an avid traveler. We often joke that I would be a gypsy if I wasn't married, but I'm very thankful we're both entrepreneurial in our way, so we can create the life that we want or the lifestyle that we want to with our businesses. But Stu acknowledges that in myself. So then I go on trips before COVID, trips by myself, or trips with girlfriends where there are these extra things that I do to fulfill that bucket, because if we just joked this morning, he's like, man, if I wasn't married to you, I would sit in this bedroom, ride my Peloton every day, work on my big chair and like not do anything.
But
like,
it shows, so you fulfill each other.
Yeah, definitely. So that's a part of it. My third part in the book is all about, it's dreaming big. It's like you mentioned with inspiration. It's, inspiration is energy, and you've got to capture that moment when you're there, that you're inspired, because it'll kind of dwindle, or you won't have the same momentum. So when I was sitting on the couch with Sue and we talked about, Oprah's Big Give, it was like, okay, well, what's one little thing that I can do to move it forward? And it was just like, okay, let's find someone that can help us plan this online fundraiser. Like, what can we do? But it talks a lot about running with that and, working with self-doubt. Like, self-doubt, absolutely. We all have it, right?
Oh, yes. Yes.
It does not matter how many stages people speak on or whatever they do. There's always that self-doubt. And I don't think it's never going to go away. It's how we manage it and how we kind of deal with it in some ways. Some people have more of it than others, but we all have it. And in that part, I talk about, our adoption with Sam, and that was an 8-year journey. Like that, as you've read, like that was insane. I had so many people say to me, like, you should just have another one of your own. Are you crazy to adopt? You should adopt domestically, and like all of this stuff. That by the time the 7th year came around, like I was in tears a lot at nighttime and saying to Stu, like, maybe this isn't right. Maybe it's not meant to be. But there was always this kind of gut feeling that I had that I didn't want to give up. And this was the picture we had of our life and what we wanted to do, that I'm so thankful we kept going. And I share more about it in the book. But some of the things that I've done to work with self-doubt, and maybe you've probably done similar things, is, number one, you've got to be mindful of the chatter in your head, because that can take over your life if you let it, with all the negative. So it's like just really being careful in what you're saying to yourself, and, loving yourself a little more, not putting yourself down so much, and just listening to the chatter that you have. Another thing that we've had that I write about in the book, for the second point, I would say that is so important, is to make sure that you're not living someone else's story. You're not living somebody else's life, because Alyssa, and my trainer that worked with me for a few years, I tried to encourage her to come on my motorcycle trip that I did, a crazy across Morocco motorcycle trip. And she's like, she really wanted to come, but she didn't come. And we talked about it after, and it was kind of revealed that her dad said she couldn't go. And she's 25 or 26. I think she's actually older now since the book came out. But she realized that it was, her dad had always gone, to Florida for winter, and he's a wonderful man, like done all these things, but he wasn't into international travel. He wasn't into this adventure kind of crazy thing. And she just didn't come. And she realized that it was like her dad's fear that was being passed down onto her. And that fear from her dad came from his grandma. And it's like all these stories that we tell ourselves, it's like important to realize, is this someone else's story that you're living, or is it truly yours? Like, you have to really think about that, because I don't think parents mean to. It's all out of love, right? It all comes out of so much love. But sometimes it's their fears they're then placing onto you, and you've got to make sure that you're listening to you and what you would like.
And because it becomes part of the belief system, and whatever is a belief system, it's so hard to break that. And there's a way of going through that, but something that is so grounded in your foundation is very hard to change. And I do find that's where the self-negative talk comes. And if that starts, it spirals out of control. So you've got to tone into that and know when to break it.
Yeah, know when to break it, for sure. And I think just, being open and talking about that, and surrounding yourself with people that can help with that, is so important. I mean, I even talk about it too, where, when I had Marla, and, I struggled with I didn't want to lose my identity as like this adventurous traveling Amy. And I was paranoid and so scared I was going to lose it, because I had so many people tell me that, oh, when you have children, your life is going to change. You won't be able to do this. And I had let those thoughts kind of take over my thinking. But then once I had Marla, I realized, I can make, this is my journey and I'm going to make it my journey, not anyone else's. And this is how I'm going to shape my journey as a mom and running a business. But all those thoughts, they can come in. So that's a part I run through too. I talk about staying the course because when we start something, it doesn't happen overnight, right? Like you don't decide to start a business and then have success next week because it just doesn't work.
And unfortunately, because we live in a world where everything happens, you press an email and it gets sent immediately and you receive it immediately on the other side. We live in a world where everything happens quickly. So we kind of get brainwashed almost in a way in order for wanting things happening. And I think this is where it's so hard to keep that motivation and that inspiration going, just to keep going no matter what.
And it's like celebrating those small little wins along the way, right? And acknowledging how far you've come. Because I often struggle with this where I put stuff on my vision board or I have something I want to do and I work so hard and I get it. And then I'm already on to the next one. And I don't take a moment to look at what we have done or look at what, we were able to do and acknowledge those things. And sometimes, when things aren't working out or it's not going well, taking a moment to look back and reflect on what you've already done to get to that point is probably pretty phenomenal, right? It's probably so much, but you forget because you're always moving forward. So it's just taking the time to remember what you've done and remember, every time we move forward, we become more clear. We have more clarity around what we want to do. Like when I started the nonprofit, it was a hot mess. It was all over the place. We were helping in all these different parts. Like we were helping with medical, like food, like just so many different things. And I felt like I was putting a Band-Aid on everything and not having a real impact. But I wouldn't have felt that way if I hadn't have done action, if I hadn't taken a moment to do these things, because the more action you take, the more clarity you're going to have around what you really want to do. It's like connecting with what you're passionate about again. Like passions change and it's okay that they change. Life changes. Like Shaw Wesmond, a friend of mine I just recently interviewed, and she had a great analogy for life where our life is like a book. It's all chapters and it's okay to move on to different chapters. And it's like with passions or taking action on your business, it's okay to think you want one thing and then get into it. And then you realize that you want something completely different, but you wouldn't have known if you hadn't have just tried it, right? Or started taking some action towards it. And then the last part of the book, there's 3 parts. It's make an impact, build your community, and leave a legacy. I love the whole book, but that part to me really is what both my husband and I love, is having an impact, creating a legacy. And, to me, there's a few things that go within that book. I'll highlight just a couple, but the importance of championing others, like supporting people, championing other people in your community, like giving them shout outs, encourage them to keep going towards their goal. Like there's so much, we can have such an impact that way, just championing other people in our community. And I think oftentimes we take for granted what a comment or a little video message to someone means, or taking the time to pick up the phone and just say congrats on what you just accomplished, or those things all make an impact. It's creating win-win relationships. It's creating relationships that both sides feel like they got the best end of the deal that you're talking about. Because when Stu and I talk about business, it's relationships they trump money any day. Like the relationships I have with my staff, with my family, obviously with my friends, money can't buy that stuff. And I'm interested in having good relationships with people and being there for them and helping them make progress. So I talk a bit about that in there, but at the end of the day, the whole thing to me with legacy, and I know that's a huge word. And I think oftentimes people get kind of intimidated by it, but it doesn't have to be that way. Like a legacy to me is all the little things that we do every day become your legacy. Yes. It's like the pleases, it's the thank yous, it's the opening the doors, it's acknowledging somebody, it's the championing of your friend, it's giving back within your business in a certain way. It's all these little things that at the end of the day create our legacy. And with my book, that was, my whole underlying thing is your passion is your purpose, because your passion and what you love to do is your unique contribution to this world. And you can make that into your purpose. Like when I look back in my life to where it is today, all those experiences of giving back and helping others, I followed it because I love it. And it's created Village Impact, which then as obviously as a nonprofit. But then even within my LadyStrength community, that again, creating experiences and travel, it's like I give away trips for that and we go together. It's there's all these things I've done to still give back, but it's using what I'm passionate about. And I think oftentimes people think they have to wait to a certain point, or they have to wait till their business reaches a certain level, or they have to wait till they have so much money that they can donate. But it's not about that. It's not about naming a building. I mean, naming a building is great, but it's not about this one-time action. It's about how we show up every single day, you know, as a mom, as a wife, as a friend, as a member of a community. It's all those little things that in turn lead your legacy at the end of the day.
And this is what I so loved, because when I read that part in the book, it immediately rang true to me, because this is something that I always spoke about. And I'm going to tell you what I always tell people.
Yeah.
As a business coach, I've been approached by so many people saying, well, you know, I want to do something, but I need to figure out what my legacy is first before I can do something, or I need to figure out what I'm passionate about first before I can do X, Y, Z. And I basically say to them that you need to just start doing anything that you're passionate about, because that's going to start opening up doors for you, bring opportunities. Your legacy is not something that you're going to have to figure out beforehand. It's something that you build on and you learn as you go on your life's journey.
Yeah.
And evidently that legacy is whatever you leave behind. It is the small things that you do. So when I read what you said in the book, I was like, that's exactly what I've been saying. I'm so glad I'm not the only one who's got this kind of philosophy about it, because that's what it's about. It's about the small things at the end of the day, giving back. I mean, silly examples. I give some of my clients, just send them out of the blue bunches of flowers if they've achieved something or done something. They don't expect it, but at that moment, it makes them go like, oh, yes, I've achieved something. I need to celebrate this. And it's these tiny little things that helps motivate you, drives you with passion. But evidently, at the end of the day, it's the legacy that you leave behind through these small things, these little ripple effects that you've started with.
Yeah. And they're not, I think oftentimes people discount they think it's small, but it's not, right? Like those small things that we do have such ripple effects throughout people's lives and the community. And oftentimes way more than we even know, because like, we don't like, you know, every now and again, I'll get a message from someone that read something and said how resonated with them, not really just my book, but other things, or it connected. And it's like, that's just some of the stories, but I bet for all of us and yourself, like there's so much impact we're having, we don't even realize it. And that's all from following our passion, or it's all from following what lights us up. And that's what having an impact is. It's following what lights us up and using it to do more good in the world and to help other people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I so agree with that. And I experienced that firsthand when I started my business. I got approached by a lady in Cape Town in South Africa, and she wanted to get to know a little bit more about what she can do to attract more clients for a product she was selling. And as we had this conversation, quickly realized that she was not passionate about selling this product. There's so much more that she wanted to do. She walked away from the call and she was so excited. She's like, I'm going to go figure out what it is that I really want to do. I never heard from her until 12 months later. I got a message from her saying, can I quickly jump on a WhatsApp call with you? Something amazing that I want to share. What's happened? I was like, oh gosh, very curious.
Oh, exciting.
Got on a call with her. And since she put down that phone from that first conversation we had, she realized that she wanted to do something within a community. Those 12 months that she was very quiet, she actually went and started a foundation in Cape Town where she could help women and young girls who's unfortunately not had a good life, who's been abused, in order to help teach them and train them how to be sustainable, how to make their own washing soap, how to grow vegetables, how to use computers. Awesome. Yeah. And it's been so amazing. And in 12 months, she's created this community, got people on board to help her with this foundation, and she's just gone from strength to strength. And I use this example because I just felt that is such a great example of just the smallest thing you do, just a conversation you have with somebody. You never know. You've planted a seed somewhere that could just sprout into the most beautiful thing, and you never knew you did it. But that is the small things in life that count. That's the legacy that you're going to leave behind.
Absolutely. It's funny. You remind me of when you said plant the seeds. I have a chapter in there, planting the seeds of possibility. And when I think of our work as our nonprofit, we partner with the government to create schools and they sustain them. But a couple of things we experimented with in the last couple of years is taking some of the kids on field trips. So we would take them from their small rural community and we hired buses and took them into the city. And some of these children had never seen like so much traffic, and they were excited to stay in traffic because they'd never seen so many cars, and some of them had never seen a knife or a fork. And so it plants those seeds of like what's possible, right? And I think that like for us here in North America, wherever we are in other parts of the world, like I talk about in the book where I lived in Mississippi for a couple of years and worked with a mentor, and he blew my mind wide open to what's possible for real estate and all these different things. And really did plant these seeds of possibility within my head because I just didn't know. And oftentimes we don't know what we don't know unless we start to take action and we start to look at people that are doing things we want to and start to move in that direction, because you just don't know. And then once you start getting into something, I really believe, doors open, and you say no to things, but then you're saying yes to all the things that, like a big wholehearted yes to what you wanted to get to.
Yes.
Those doors open.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think this is what's so inspirational about your story as well, because my motto is never say no to an opportunity, because once you say no, it could be gone forever. At least say yes, check it out. Then if you feel, okay, this is not quite what I thought it was, you can still say no to it. But there's those opportunities that you get that you can't say no to them. Just go for it and see where it takes you, because it could lead to other opportunities as well. And this is what you've done, you and Stu both, and I admire that so much. And it's a great inspiration for me again. It's just like, it just shows, just go for it, go for things, just take the action. If you're passionate about something, go for it. Don't let anything or anybody stop you, and just see where it goes. You don't need to figure out the how, which you also talk about. You don't need to figure out the how. It will come along. You just need to start with it.
Yeah, I talk about that Mississippi time in the book. And, I look at that now, and some of the people that we met on that time where I worked in Mississippi for a couple of years are some of our biggest donors with our nonprofit. Like they became business partners in projects. And that all came from saying yes to, going to live in the deep South of the United States, which was a great opportunity. And we learned so much. I came at that point, and I think I shared, I'd just gotten back from Teachers College in Australia. Stu and I had been apart for a year. He was offered the job to go there. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, I'm going to stay here. But then John, who I talk about in the book, the owner of the company, starts talking to me. He offers me a car, a place to stay. I'm like, wow, that sounds good. And traveling, right? Because he said I could travel and do these events all over North America. And I'm like, wow, that sounds good to me. That's better than teaching. I get to travel at least.
Yeah.
So it's following that. And we had no idea where or how that would change our lives, but it certainly did, because we said yes to that. Sent us on a different path. And I think if we had chose something else, it would have for sure
been different. Oh yeah, no, I agree with you. So just for everybody listening, so obviously the 7 steps are in the book, and I'm just going to quickly just conclude to what Amy has said here. So be open to possibility, and fulfill your buckets, so look at your buckets, fill them up, which I'm a huge fan of. Dream big. Oh my goodness, I can talk about this just on one podcast alone. Stay on the course, stay motivated, find that clarity. And this is one thing that I always talk about as well, is once you have clarity, you feel a lot more committed, and then you're a lot more consistent. So I talk about the 3 C's there. Make an impact. Oh my goodness, definitely. And then building your community and leaving a legacy. And this all comes together in Amy's book, which, Amy, I would like to ask you a little bit to talk about the book. And what we're going to make sure as well, for those of you listening and watching the video, the link for Amy's book is going to be in the show notes as well. So make sure you go and check it out there. But Amy, let me hand over to you so you can just talk a little bit more about the book and then where people can get it as well.
Yeah. So the book, you can get the book, first of all, at passionandpurposebook.com. And I have a whole bunch of freebies and different things that you can do for that. But when it comes to the book, I wrote this book really for 3 people. It sounds funny, but for 3 people. The first is for somebody who is like drifting and they feel like they have no passions, maybe you're feeling frustrated. This was kind of like me several years ago where, I felt like I liked traveling, but I couldn't see how I could connect it to other things. And I kept seeing friends or different people online with all these success stories and comparing myself, which I know you shouldn't. But, I was feeling frustrated because I couldn't find something that I felt could turn into something. So that was kind of all over the place. But then I ultimately ended up going back to what lighted me up, which was traveling, giving back, obviously since morphed into what it is today. The other thing is for somebody who's lost themselves, where you kind of have been saying yes to everybody else, but not saying yes to you and, acknowledging what you love to do. And then you wake up like 10 years later and you're wondering, I don't know how I got here. Like, how did that happen? And then the third one is for people who, know what they're passionate about, but are kind of having difficulty connecting it to do more good in the world. Mm-hmm. And the whole premise around my book, or the whole theme is, find your passion and use that to do more good in the world. Everybody can do that. It doesn't have to be starting in your own organization. It doesn't have to be starting your own company. It's the little things like we both talked about. It's using your passion to then do more good in the world and leave your legacy through the little things that we do. Yeah, that's like in a nutshell. I could share. Is there anything that you pulled out that you would like me to share further on?
Yeah, I mean, if you can just talk a little bit about village impact as well, because, that is something that I wholeheartedly want to support and, with my audience. If you could just tell us a little bit about village impact, about what you're doing there and what you've already done and achieved so far, that would be amazing just to share that with the audience as well.
Yeah, so all the proceeds from the book is actually going towards our 15th school, which will be a girls' school. Village Impact was years ago started called World Teacher Aid. We changed it to Village Impact. And in a sense, we really focused on building schools. So we partner with the government. So when we go in to build a school, the government sustains the schools. So they supply all the teachers, they run it. And that was a huge thing for both Stu and I was, if I were to walk away tomorrow, I would want to know that the school would still be there. Like it's, they can sustain it. It's not relying on donors to continue to contribute. So the government sustains the schools and we focus, we have we have four team members on the ground in Kenya that are all local Kenyans. And then I have 2 North American ladies that help me from the North American side. So we're pretty small. But I like to say we're small and we're mighty because we don't have, we like to get a lot done with what we have. And then from another financial part, which I love, is that every time I send money over to Irene is a person I talk about in the book. And so she's Kenyan. She has her own nonprofit in Kenya. So she's like my business partner. And then I send her funds over. She sends me money back down to the penny where everything is gone. Our spreadsheets are so insanely detailed, and that's been the same since day one. And I've sent her now millions and she has sent me still back to the penny of where it goes. So I work very closely with Irene to do that. And then our other business, we've actually worked out where, and this is Stu's business in Tribe and membership software, they donate a chunk of money every year that covers our overhead. So then 98% or 99% of all the money that comes into our nonprofit goes towards our charity of building schools. So we have, in a sense, we build schools, but we also do little things within the community. So the field trips I was talking about, because we talk about opening up possibility and see what's possible. We did just start to go into entrepreneurship within our communities. And it's kind of a bummer because COVID hit and we had planned our first summer camp for our grade 12 students or grade 13 students, where it was an entrepreneurial summer camp for 2 weeks. And we had local Kenyans coming to talk about business and it was going to be amazing. And then COVID hit and everything kind of, put on hold, right? We will actually do it. But,
yeah, I'm sure you will.
Yeah. And so that's our main focus. We do donor trips every couple of years and take some of our donors over. My kids have been over several times with me. I'm usually there a few times a year. I haven't been obviously since COVID, but yeah, I just love working with the community, working with the government, working with our staff, and not only learning about them, but learning about myself and just working together to see how we can have more of an impact.
Yeah. And I think this is why I love your story so much, because when I started my business, one of can I say my buckets, even though I didn't put it in a bucket then? One of my buckets was always to go and find something where there's a charitable foundation that is something that is aligned with me, aligned with my African roots and, working with children and things like that. And when I came across Village Drive, and I was like, this is it. This is what I've been looking for. This is the thing that I want to support, which is why I was so excited to have you here on the podcast, to read your book and just to really feel that, this is something amazing. And I think what you and Stu are doing are fantastic. And I highly recommend everybody listening or watching this to go now down to the show notes and go and get Amy's book, because you are going to fall in love with it as much as I did. It's going to open your mind, shall I say? It's really going to open up your mind.
Can I read a part of my book? The last
Absolutely.
Part? This is because it ties everything in together. But I say here, so this is on page 157. The key to making a true difference is not trying to take on the world. Listen, not trying to take on the world, right? Especially if you feel you can barely come up for air. Instead, take a deep breath and, you guessed it, come back to your passion. This is the starting point and the end point of making a meaningful impact, of living a life that is, in the greater scheme of things, has it more meaningful and fulfilling. You absolutely have everything you need to make the difference. You do. And it's not about having enough money or power to change the entire world with one grand gesture. It's really about fully standing in your own integrity, in what moves you and calls you and fills you with joy and a deeper sense of connection to yourself and to others.
Amazing. Oh, bless. Do you mind holding up the book as well, so everybody can just see, for those watching the video?
Sorry, it's got all my notes.
No, it's fine. I wish I could hold up a copy of the book, but I could only get a Kindle version here in the UK for now. So I was like, that's it. I'm fine with my Kindle version. I'm going to read it before we record this episode.
We'll have to send you. Well, the funny thing is, with the audio and the Kindle one, I actually read the audio of the book. And the funny thing is, when I read the audio in the studio, the owner of the studio was like, so how did you get your gig of doing the voiceover? And I'm like, well, it's my book. And he's like, oh, sorry. And I've had like dozens of people tell me that I need to do a voiceovers more often, which is so crazy. I'm like, I don't even know. But anyway, if you do the voice, if you can get the voice, me reading it, you will hear when I talk about Sam and adopting Sam. That was really hard for me to read that part.
I can imagine.
I cried several times. Even the producer's like, do you want to do it another day? And I'm like, no. I'm like, it's not going to change. Like this emotion will never go away. Like remembering that moment. But yeah, I do actually read it. So for those of you that love hearing the author read it, because I've heard that too, being a first-time author, I'd never heard before, but people have said they like it when the authors actually read their books versus somebody else.
Yeah, because you get the voice and the energy is coming through straight through the audio, which is what people really enjoy. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, Amy, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for taking the time to being here on the podcast. And for every one of you listening, like I said, I can't say it enough, but go and have a look at Amy's book. Go and look at Village Impact as well. All the details will be below in my show notes. And Amy, I'd love to be in contact with you again in the future. And I wish you all of the success with your book. I'm sure it's going to be a huge success regardless. Well, whatever we can do in order to support you with Village Impact and what you guys are doing, let us know. We'd be happy to support you.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Bless you. Take care.
Thank you.